who is allowed to carry a handgun in public in Georgia, and the issue of transgender rights making its way back into the national political spectrum and discourse are two of the topics for this edition of Political Update on Atlanta News First for the week of May 24th, 2025, the last week of May. So we are beginning this edition of Political Update on Atlanta News First with some rather surprising endorsements in Georgia's wide-open gubernatorial race in 2026. Joined by my friend and colleague Rick Bolbaum, happy to always be discussing politics with him. I'm Tim Darnell. And Rick, we're talking about Georgia's governor's race. Our discussion over the past couple of weeks has really centered around former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms' entry into the race, becoming only the second former Atlanta mayor next to Andrew Young to ever run for Georgia governor, but the first Democrat who announced his candidacy for governorship, State Senator Jason Esteves, picked up some rather interesting endorsements this week, and I think maybe the reason that we find them interesting is that they are so oriented in the city of Atlanta. We're looking at the president of the Atlanta City Council, Doug Shipman, 3 other Atlanta City Council members, a total of 8 members of Atlanta's Georgia legislative delegation, 3 very prominent state senators, Nan Orrock, Elena Parent, and Donzella James, 5 members of the Atlanta Public School Board and a DeKalb County Commissioner, Ted Terry, who has long been known for his progressive policies. I think maybe what we're looking at is these are names that we may have originally associated with endorsing Keisha Lance Bottoms, and yet they go to her main opponent so far in next year's Democratic primary, State Senator Jason Esteves.
Well, first of all, Tim, I think we have to look at the calendar and realize that at this point in time, there are certainly a lot of political news junkies like us, and I would assume people listening to us or watching this video feed who are following this. But the vast majority of voters here in the state of Georgia have no idea who is endorsing whom at this early stage of the game here in the Democratic primary race. But to your point about some of these endorsements, you're absolutely right. I mean, these are people who presumably Keisha Lance Bottoms worked with. These are people who know her well. You know, she was the mayor of Atlanta just right up until a couple of years ago now. But they evidently have a preference, at least at this point, for Jason Esteves, and they're coming out and saying so, which of course is something that the Esteves campaign must love, especially in the days after Keisha Lance Bottoms announced her candidacy and sort of came riding in as this big name, Atlanta celebrity type of candidate with the name recognition as she has. Entering into the governor's race. So this is something that the Esteves people are able to point at and say, look, these are people who know the former mayor and still they're backing Esteves. So, draw your own conclusions, what that says about how they feel about her. But again, at this point, I think it's still a little early for people, for most people here in Georgia, voters certainly, who are not yet turning their attention to this race.
Well, we know for a fact that Georgia's gubernatorial race next year is wide open. We've talked extensively about how Governor Brian Kemp is term limited, and this is going to be one of the most watched governor's races in the 2026 midterm elections coming up next year. We know that State Senator Jason Esteves, former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, and local businessman and Pastor Olu Brown are the Democratic contenders. On the GOP side, it's been very quiet since Attorney General Chris Carr announced his candidacy earlier this year. We're still waiting on announcements from or perhaps future political plans regarding Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and also what would many consider the frontrunner in any GOP gubernatorial primary, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. We have not heard from him.
We have not heard from them. We don't know when we will. But I think that the overall impression out there, the feeling among political experts here in Georgia, is that the lieutenant governor is going to enter the race at some point. And the reason why he hasn't yet announced his candidacy is, number one, he doesn't have to. He doesn't really need to raise money. Apparently, he has a large war chest full of campaign funds that he can use to fund a campaign. So he doesn't have to get out early and start going around doing the process of fundraising. And number two, as long as has not announced his intentions, it leaves a whole slew of other Republicans sort of sitting in no man's land, wondering, whether or not they're going to be able to get into the race, whether they want to challenge the lieutenant governor if and when he decides to run. So it's sort of keeping the entire Republican side of this, a little bit of a mystery at this point. And you mentioned the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. A lot of people wondering what his intentions are. No secret that he has talked about his desire to hold a higher office here in the state of Georgia. So we'll see how this shakes out. But, a lot of Republicans, I think, who might otherwise be wanting to get into this race are waiting until Burt Jones makes his announcement and deciding exactly what they're going to do.
Well, the 2026 governor's race is not the only race that we're following. Another hugely important contest coming up next year is for the U.S. Senate. Democratic incumbent Jon Ossoff is running for re-election. We know that Governor Kemp and U.S. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene are not running or will not challenge Senator Ossoff next year. That has opened the door for a couple of other candidates on the Republican side. Georgia Insurance and Fire Commissioner John King announced very recently that the first Republican to enter Georgia's Republican Senate primary a couple of weeks ago was U.S. Congressman Buddy Carter. And he released an ad this week that is raising again the issue of transgender politics and policies in the public spectrum. We all remember last year, then GOP White House nominee Donald Trump ran a very effective and ultimately pretty successful advertisement in which he framed the issue of transgender politics into a very negative light onto his opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris. It's one of the most effective ads that we've seen in quite a while, and a lot of national political pundits point to it perhaps being a defining issue in helping Donald Trump reclaim the White House. Buddy Carter, who is a supporter of Donald Trump, released an ad this week in which someone who is apparently a biological male is complaining about Buddy Carter's record in allegedly helping protect women's sports and their integrity. Buddy Carter obviously hoping to use the same political strategy that Donald Trump used in hopefully propelling him to a successful bid in the United States Senate.
Well, Tim, you look at Buddy Carter's ads, and it's hard to know, are these ads for Buddy Carter or are they ads for Donald Trump? Because you see the president in the ads almost as much as you do Representative Carter. Clearly, Buddy Carter is taking a page from the Trump playbook, and why wouldn't he? As you said, it was seen by a lot of people as one of the most effective ads of the campaign cycle last year, the presidential race. And when it comes to winning the hearts and minds and the votes of primary voters, what do? You go right after the red meat issues, the issues that really motivate the base. Those are the people that tend to go out and vote in primaries. Those are the people who are paying attention to the issues that are being talked about right now, even at this early stage of the campaign. And the issue of transgender rights and transgenders in sports and all of those issues surrounding that community proved to be very galvanizing for Republicans in the last election cycle. And so I think that it should be no surprise to anybody that Buddy Carter, who was out there early, I really got to hand it to him, going out and spending money and running ads, trying to sort of take the early lead here in the Republican primary contest, coming out and using this issue once again, trying to motivate people who might come out and vote for him in the primary.
The other red meat issue, using your words, that a lot of folks have been paying attention to in every political cycle is the right to own and bear firearms. The Georgia Supreme Court this week reaffirmed the fact that only adults over the age or age 21 and older are allowed to carry handguns in public. This was a Supreme Court challenge brought to the Supreme Court by a gentleman named Thomas Stevens, who is a 20-year-old individual who was denied a carry permit by a Georgia probate court. He's 20 years old. Georgia law stipulates that you have to be 21 to own or carry a handgun in public. His argument was that if you're old enough to vote, you should be old enough to carry a gun in public. In issues like this, Rick, it's just usually not that simple, is it?
No, it's not. And, another thing to pay attention to is what part of the law this young man tried to challenge. So often with these Supreme Court cases, and we're seeing this even at the U.S. Supreme Court with the Trump administration trying to defend some of its policies, it's not exactly always trying to get the Supreme Court to weigh in on the heart of the issue, but sometimes a legal argument is made using a portion, some language that really sort of narrows down what it is that they're challenging, and as a result narrows down what the Supreme Court is going to decide on. The Supreme Court can only decide on the cases that are brought before them. So even as the Supreme Court came down and ruled in favor of upholding this law, this ban on public carry for those under the age of 21, they didn't really weigh in on that specific issue. That said, the law allows people in Georgia under the age of 21 to carry a handgun, if they have received special training as part of military service. People are allowed to carry a gun. Young people under 21 allowed to carry a gun in their homes, in their cars, in their place of business, or for sport shooting, for hunting. So there are a lot of circumstances, one could argue, where people under the age of 21 are allowed by law to carry a handgun. But as far as carrying it out in public, the Supreme Court letting that law stand, essentially, and keeping that law in place. And this is a Supreme Court here in Georgia that is not exactly a liberal-leaning court. So, I don't think that anybody would have anticipated them, wanting to do anything to erode at Second Amendment rights. In fact, this is a court that has upheld the Second Amendment time and again.
And the issue of gun ownership and proper safety in gun handling came up during the most recent Georgia General Assembly session, where the lawmakers continue to offer significant tax breaks when it comes to gun ownership, and also encouraging and promoting the use of proper safety procedures when handling guns. But you and I have spoken before, we still do not have anything codified in Georgia law that requires handgun purchasers to undergo any kind of safety or firearms training. And you've spoken on this issue before. It's just an issue of lawmakers really wanting to have the issue both ways. We want to promote gun ownership, but really are not going to require any kind of proper safety training.
Well, this is an issue, obviously, people feel very passionately on both sides. We are in a state here in Georgia with a Republican in the governor's mansion, Republicans in charge of both state houses here on Capitol Hill, and a Supreme Court that, as we said, is majority conservative as far as who appointed these justices to their positions. So you would expect that the Second Amendment would receive a lot of support here in the state of Georgia, and it has, and most likely it will continue, as Georgia, it really has some of the most lax laws in the country when it comes to gun ownership and the circumstances under which guns can be owned and stored and carried and used.
The other election that we've been following here on Atlanta News First this week, early voting is also now underway in a special election for the Public Service Commission in two districts, District 2 and 3. This is obviously a hugely important electoral board that oversees the administration of the state's private and public utility rates, such as Georgia Power and other natural gas and electrical utilities. Interesting development this week. One of the candidates, a Democrat named Daniel Blackman, was disqualified from the District 3 race because of residency requirements. So we're continuing to cover that special election. Early voting, as I said, is underway in that election, and encourage everyone to follow all of the latest updates, not only in the public service race, but in everything that is politically related here in the state of Georgia on Political Update from Atlanta News First and atlantanewsfirst.com. This has been Political Update for Friday, May 30th, 2025, for the entire week of May 24th, 2025. For Rick Folbaum, I'm Tim Darnell, encouraging all of you to watch all of our podcasts on our YouTube channel and also on your Roku app, and listen to every Atlanta News First podcast, Political Update, Overtime, Decatur Dish, Behind the Investigation on your favorite podcasting platform.